110,000 foreigners were granted pandemic event visas by the Albanese government well after the crisis ended, raising questions about Labor's ability to manage migration targets. Now, 90% of those who received the visas since Labor was elected and had reached the end of their permitted time in the country, only 20% of those actually left the country since that visa expired. So, Teena, look, we've already got record migration numbers in this country, and now we've got visa holders who've overstayed their welcome and nothing's been done. I mean, we know that immigration is a weak point for Labor, but this is beyond a joke.
It just gets worse and worse. As Teena said, this is all politically motivated, not what's best for the country. And what is worse, besides the fact that only 20% have departed, we're funding the others up to $12 million to stay. We're funding their legal cases to help them stay here. I mean, it's madness. And I don't care what Albanese does. I think he's gone. I think the majority of Australians are terrified. The circumstances we're living in is horrific. And I think he's gone. I really do, because he's not attempting to address any of these issues.
No, it's just swept under the rug. And migration is such a big problem right now. You know, it's impacting so many different facets of our lives. But that's a big oversight, Tanya. 90,000 people just seemingly swanning about without a visa.
Well, yes, on a COVID pandemic visa that expired. It's extraordinary. And Tina's right. They are funding these community legal centres that constantly advertise that they provide free legal advice to migrants and to visa holders. It's not free. The taxpayer's paying for it. And what they're doing is gaming the system. So half these people are now on student visas or they're on a new protection order, and they get advice from these community legal centres on how to game the system, and they do so.
Yes.
And they won't be going anywhere because they want to stay in Australia.
Well, clearly.
I'll tell you where you can find them. You can find them in those protests most weekends.
and that's the problem.
That's the problem.
Exactly.
At universities.
And at universities and encampments, just sitting there disgusting. Now, former Labor Minister Kim Carr has blasted the Albanese government for losing touch with traditional blue-collar voters, turning to identity politics with a censorious tone towards those who don't agree, favouring the elites and inner city over the suburbs, and lacking a policy ambition to transform Australia. Now, this is a pretty damning indictment from within the party. Mr Carr wrote this in his upcoming memoir that Labor's primary vote is in rapid decline as its traditional voters have lost faith and the prospect of a minority government beckons. Teena, look, this is a pretty frank but very accurate assessment.
It's spot on. I love a good Labor memoir.
So do I. I'll be reading it.
But this is, he's quite right. And it's not, Albanese and his whole cabinet, they do attack people that don't agree with them. That's the premise of his argument. And it's so true. And again, you know, people are so attacked, they're too scared to speak up, but we all have to speak up now and show what we feel when we vote in the next election.
And I agree with him. He really has lost touch with that blue-collar base. I mean, the working class base was Labor's heartland now. Not anymore, Tanya. They have just disowned that part of the base.
Yeah, and so many working class people are now moving to parties like One Nation and of course the Coalition. Look, it must be very demoralising for federal Labor today when a Labor elder comes out like that. So, and I can only imagine that nobody took any press today as Kim Carr did so. Look, Kim Carr actually voted for Albanese in 2013 in the vote against Bill Shorten. So he is part of the hard left. So it's actually interesting. It's one of his own, okay?
Yes.
It's somebody that within his own faction, within his own grouping. But look, Kim Carr comes from sort of the industrialised base. He's a unionist, and he is somebody that would have worked, would have expected a Labor government to come up with some reform, maybe in IR or economic reform or human rights and have some big picture ideas, a bit like Keating had. Instead, it's been a small target strategy, and all he's doing is just plodding along.
But you know what?
So it must be very
Albanese
frustrating for these Labor elders.
He's so arrogant, he couldn't care what was written. He really couldn't care. And the other problem is Albanese and others have been staffers or in that little Labor bubble their entire lives. They've got no idea what it is to be like a gyprocker, a plumber.
No.
You know, anyone.
Well, hang on. Didn't Albanese get raised in state housing? As he keeps telling us.
And left his mum there.
Exactly.